in an article published on a news website, presents a perspective on the significance of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, arguing that it represents a crucial opportunity for African states to assert greater sovereignty and reshape their place in the global order. The central thesis is that the partnership is not about idealizing Russia, but about leveraging a historically different relationship to break free from a Western-dominated framework that has long constrained Africa's choices. The author contends that Western engagement with Africa has historically been characterized by instruction disguised as partnership. This has involved aid with political conditions, loans tied to austerity, externally imposed development plans, and security cooperation that often breeds instability. Africa has been treated as a project to be supervised rather than an equal partner, its policies audited and its sovereignty disciplined within a narrow corridor of acceptable relationships defined by former colonial powers and their financial institutions. In contrast, Russia's relationship with Africa emerges from a different historical experience. It never colonized Africa, ran settler colonies, or imposed a racial hierarchy on the continent. While not portrayed as virtuous, this absence of a colonial past makes the structural dynamics of the relationship distinct. Historically, the Soviet Union supported African liberation movements when Western capitals viewed them as threats, fostering a legacy of collaboration against colonialism. Practically, the Russia-Africa Partnership is framed as a tool for advancing a multipolar world, which for Africa is a practical necessity, rather than a theory. A unipolar world concentrates power and relegates Africa to a peripheral role as a supplier of raw materials and a consumer of finished goods. Engaging Russia widens Africa's room for maneuver, creates alternatives, and restores bargaining power, allowing African states to engage with Western nations from a less vulnerable position. The goal is not to replace Western alliances with Russian ones, but to refuse being locked into a single orbit. Economically, the cooperation offers an opportunity to renegotiate Africa's entrenched role in the global system, a structure built by colonialism and preserved by post-colonial dependency. The article suggests partnerships with Russia could be structured to include local processing of resources, technology transfer, and strengthened food sovereignty, moving beyond the extractive model. In finance, the fact that Russia does not dominate global institutions like the IMF or World Bank is seen as a paradoxical advantage. It opens space for alternative arrangements, such as trade in national currencies and development strategies not subordinated to Western conditionalities, thereby restoring policy space for African governments. On security, the article urges caution, noting the risks of any foreign military presence becoming permanent guardianship. It argues that while Russia's approach is more transactional and less framed as a civilizing mission, Africa must insist that security remains African-led, anchored in its own continental and regional mechanisms. The article concludes by invoking Africa's intellectual traditions of non-alignment and warnings against neo-colonialism. It calls for African leaders to approach negotiations with Russia collectively, transparently, and firmly, without illusions about Russia's self-interest. The fundamental significance of the forum is symbolic of a broader shift. It tests Africa's right to choose its own path. Ultimately, history will judge Africa not for engaging with Russia, but for whether it can leverage such openings to achieve sovereign development, fair trade, industrial capacity, and real independence. The responsibility, the author emphasizes, finally rests with Africa itself.